things we do, the things we say, these are the greatest gifts we'll ever give away, the things we do. Now every day in this life, every moment you will find a heart is healed, a dream is found, a tear is dried, and laughter is heard. And somewhere, someone's life will be changed by the things we do, the things we say, shine gentle rays of hope that touch us all each day. Yes, the things we do, the things we say, these are the greatest gifts we'll ever give away, the things we do. Oh, every hand that has been held has reached out for somebody else. In every move we make, every day, we shine a light this way, the things we do, the things we say, shine gentle rays of hope that touch us all each day. Yes, the things we do, the things we say, these are the greatest gifts we can ever give away, the things we do.
Thank you, Connie. I love that song. Every time you sing it, I'm just a little bit mesmerized by it. I think it's such an important consideration that the things we do are often the gifts that we bring, the things that we do, the things that we say to one another. This time of year especially, and especially in a year like this, it's important to know both the gifts that we carry and the gifts that we have available to share, because we need each other's comfort. We need time with one another. And I want to encourage you to think about that, to think about who you can make a phone call to this week. And I say a phone call because we get a lot of screen time. A lot of us are doing other things with the screen. There's something really touching about a phone call, something that really connects us to who we were as children before we had all of this great technology. Something wonderful about sitting with a cup of tea and a neighbor that we can't necessarily walk next door to, but we can certainly hear their voice and be close to them. I also want to encourage you to think about Christmas cards this year, because this year, the gift of a handwritten card is more precious than it may have been in the last few years. To know that someone is thinking of us really matters in this time when we're isolating, whether we're isolating completely by ourselves or we're isolating with only a few people around us. We're seeing a lot fewer people. And that human connection, when we are limited in our movement, is incredibly important and such a gift. So if you have time to do that, take time to send out a handwritten note. Take time to tell someone how important they are in your life. It really matters this year. Last week, we started talking about the Nativity, and I shared with you that there was a time that this was a really hard thing for me to explore. I carried a lot of wounds from previous incarnations of Christianity into this forum when I came in as your minister. I had a lot of pain associated with other traditions I was involved in, and it took me quite some time to really move through that pain associated with judgment and pain associated with God as a punitive form, to move into a place that I could hear these very primary, very foundational stories that really are what Christianity grew out of. And this story, the story of the Nativity, is where it all begins. This is really the start, isn't it? So last week we explored a few things, and I just want to touch on them because they're important. This is a whole story. Last week we talked about the possibility of Mary and Joseph, who were in Nazareth and unmarried, traveling to Bethlehem 90 miles away through forests where there might have been bandits and there might have been wild animals. There actually are wild animals in that valley. We talked about how unlikely it might be that a woman who was that close to giving birth would make that long journey. We also have to consider that life was different. There are a lot of things that we do now that 1,000 years from now, people might say, why did they do that? I can't believe they really did that. So the truth is, when it comes to facts about this story, we don't know a lot. But we can look historically at what was going on in the world at that time, and it gives us some indications. One of the things that we learned is last week we took a look at what a home would look like. And we learned that the stable, which we understand to be out back in our modern world, the stable is not part of our house. It's away from the house, and it's not a very nice place. But we learned last week that in the time that Jesus would have been born, the stable was in the home. It actually, the animals were brought in at night to the lower level of the home, and in that same area is where the kitchen and food was kept. So they had to keep that area very clean for their own health reasons. And the animals were brought in because they didn't have electric heating. They didn't even have a place for a fire. In most of those homes, it was the animals coming in and the body heat of the animals that kept the house warm. And so the animals came in, they were cared for there, and they were also safe from being stolen because they were a food source. And so people had to rely on them. They were very precious and very loved and very cared about. We talked about the fact that in a Jewish household, if a family member had come, and remember that it had been ordered supposedly, and there is no evidence of this, but that supposedly it had been ordered that there would be a census for tax purposes, that everyone had to be counted. And so you had to go back to the land you came from, to the land of your ancestors, which is the reason, according to the story, that Mary and Joseph would have traveled to Bethlehem anyway. In the Jewish culture, if that had been the case in the Jewish culture, then the family would have said, there would have not have been an inn. The family would have said, of course, come in. We were expecting you. We have lots of people here. And Mary, you're 9 months pregnant. We don't want you walking up the ladder to the second floor. We want you to stay down here. We're going to make a nice place for you down here, and it'll be nice and warm when the animals come in. Very different concept to start this story, understanding that you are welcomed in rather than cast out to the barn. Because if this is the story of your Christ consciousness, your divine self coming here to this physical form, coming into this physical world, you want to be welcome, don't you? Of course, come in. This body was made for you. This is the home of your history. You will build your life from here. Come in, you are welcome. So the story is a really important thing. What this story really means and understanding the culture of what was going on then. I have a video I want to share with you, and it will take me just a minute because I forgot to pull it up. But I have a little video about the kings that I want to share with you. And I'm hoping, there it is. Let me just pull it up here. Okay. And I would like to have you take a look at this for that purpose, to get a little bit of the history of what was going on then. Let me share my sound so you can hear it. And I will open this all the way up.
When Jesus was born in Bethlehem, there came wise men from the east to Jerusalem, saying, "Where is he that is born King of the Jews? For we have seen his star in the east and are come to worship him." No mention of them being kings, no mention of how many, no mention of how they traveled. But there's a lot of clues there about them. The fact that they were in the east when they saw the star. That's how I choose to read it. Rather than that wherever they are, they saw the star in the east. But rather that they were in the east when they saw the star. And east of Jerusalem is where the vast majority of Jews were actually living at the time of Christ. The Jews were taken into captivity in Babylon 600 years before the birth of Christ, and they never came home. Only a small contingent returned to Jerusalem. So the center of learning for the Jews was Babylon. And that's where the wise men would be, wise men like Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And so they will continue to be advisors to the court and will be literate in scientific men who in Babylon would be studying astronomy for the signs of the sky and to determine when to have the holy days that are spoken of in Scripture. So if you're coming to worship the King of the Jews, odds are you're Jewish. And you're reading about him in a Jewish book, which would be the Old Testament. And Isaiah in particular has a lot to say about those who come to worship the King of the Jews. And I think that Christians asked a lot of questions as this story in Matthew was told and written down. They wanted more information. Where did they come from? What were their names? How did they get there? And so they turned back to their scriptures to find those answers. And so it's in chapter 60 of Isaiah, we get a lot of indication of where those answers came from. It begins, "Arise, shine, for thy light is come, and the glory of the Lord is risen upon thee." So the light has arisen. The star is there. And in verse 3, "And the Gentiles shall come to thy light, and kings to the brightness of thy rising." So immediately we say, they're Gentile kings. And then it says, "A multitude of camels will cover thee, the dromedaries." And so we have camels as the way they're coming, and in particular, dromedary camels, coming from Midian and Ephah and Sheba. Well, there you have the three countries. So there are three of them. And in particular, Ephah and Midian are Middle Eastern countries. Sheba is Ethiopia. And so one of these kings must be black. They'll end up with names from the early Christians, being named Balthazar and Caspar and Melchior. Those are just honestly made up names, but they're great. They're great names. And then it describes what these Gentile kings will bring. They will bring gold and incense and show forth the praises of the Lord. So in my mind, I think, okay, we have Jewish men who are educated and literate, and they read in the scriptures that there will be a star, that's from the book of Numbers, that will arise at his birth in the prophecies of Balaam. So looking for that star, they search the heavens, and finding a star that they believe to be that star, they say, when that star arises, we got to get camels and go. And what we need to bring is gold and incense. And so they will bring gold, which is a kingly gift. They'll bring incense, probably two different kinds, frankincense and myrrh. Frankincense was offered at the temple with every offering, both on the altar of prayer and the altar of sacrifice. Myrrh was melted down and mixed in a special recipe into the anointing oil of the temple, and was also used for anointing the bodies of the dead. So there's some great symbolism there. And then it goes on and talks about some other great pieces. Doves in the window. And so we'll see doves in every manger scene. It has the glory of Lebanon shall come to thee, the fir tree and the pine tree and the box, to beautify the place of my sanctuary. And so most of our sanctuaries, our churches, are decorated with evergreen trees and branches because Isaiah said so. And I love the idea that these men read the scriptures and said, somebody's got to do it. Why not us? We will be the ones who will fulfill the prophecies of the Lord, and we will get to meet the Messiah. And so it's really cool to think of those years, that at least 2 years that they traveled and talked about what this is going to be like, and then to fall on their knees as they meet the Christ child and his parents. What an amazing moment that must have been to pay them back for their efforts.
So it's an interesting story, isn't it? It's interesting. I'm going to turn this off here so it doesn't jump back out at me as sometimes those videos do. It's a very different perspective that was just shared with us. A lot of times we hear about the three kings as coming from the Orient, but it's a very interesting consideration that they would have been Jewish kings. And it also explains a lot of what is not explained in the book of Matthew. Matthew doesn't talk about why these gifts are brought, where these kings come from, any of that stuff. None of that is explained in the New Testament. So if you have no understanding of the Old Testament, then you really have no foundation for this story. But if you were Jewish and you were following the Old Testament, then all of the pieces of this part of the story have already been told to you. You are prepared for this journey. And I find that really fascinating. I want to share my screen again with you. And as I told you last week, I have taken the time to make some slides for this particular lesson because there's so much information here that it's helpful if we can see it and we can hear it and we can think about it at the same time. It's helpful to just give us another channel for receiving. And again, this is a piece of the greatest story that was ever told, and we call it that because it's our story. It's the story of who we really are. Who we really are. And that's why this story has stuck around for so long. It's not the only story of who we really are. This is not the only place that you will be told you are the divine expressing. But this is a powerful story with lots of great symbology. So after Jesus was born in Bethlehem of Judea, during the time of King Herod, wise men came from the east to Jerusalem and asked, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews? We saw his star in the east. We have come to worship him." When King Herod learned of this, he was troubled, and all of Jerusalem with him. So why was King Herod troubled? Well, because King Herod was Roman, and the Romans were in charge of the land. They had conquered that land, and they did not want the Jews to rise up against them. The last thing King Herod would want is a king of the Jews to be born. So he called to him the wise men from the east and said, "Where did this happen and how long ago? How long have you been following this star?" And the king said, 2 years. We've been following it for 2 years. So Herod called together the scholars and the clerics, and he asked them to find out exactly where this child was. Well, they knew from scriptures, and they were able to say in Bethlehem of Judea, because that's what the prophet wrote. The prophet said that the king would be born in that area. So Herod summoned the wise men secretly and found out exactly when the star came. And then he sent them and said, "Go find that child. Go find that child." Now, one of the interesting parts of this story is after they found the child, they didn't go back the way they came. They didn't go back and tell Herod that they had found the king. And that's the reason that King Herod put out an order across the land that all children in Judea who were 2 years old or younger, all male children, were to be killed. So this is a really important piece of the foundation to Christ's life. That really important consideration that there is a threat. When the divine in you is born, there is a threat. So the metaphysical meaning of the wise men is the stored up resources of the soul that rise to the surface when its depths are stirred by a great spiritual revelation. So here's your revelation. You are God expressing. This is your revelation. This is a pretty great spiritual revelation. If you've never heard this, if you came out of a faith tradition that didn't teach you this, and what you were taught was that you are separate from God, then the idea that you are the divine clothed in human clothing, this is a pretty big spiritual revelation. These spiritual revelations also include, according to the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary, which is the work of Charles Fillmore, our co-founder, this is where the records of past lives are kept and reserved for a day when the soul will receive the supreme ego or the supreme self. So this is pretty powerful. First of all, this particular definition tells us that Charles Fillmore believed in reincarnation. This is where we begin to see that as a truth in unity, that there is reference to past lives. And so we might find our resources in the soul, these inclinations about spirit. We might find them because someone teaches us that we are the divine expressing. We might find them because an inkling rises up inside of us. We might find them because our memories begin to bleed through from who we have been through all eternity, because we are a collection of wisdom from all the times and places our souls have traveled through. Herod was the family name of several rulers of Judea, and according to, again, the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary, The Herod represents the ruling will of the physical, the ego in its sense consciousness. And sense consciousness means this is the part of me that knows I'm cold. This is the part of me that knows I'm too warm. This is the part of me that knows I'm hungry. This is the part of me that is afraid of not having enough, that is worried about survival, because this sense aspect of me does not understand that I am an eternal being. So Herod represents that part of us that does not know that we are eternal, that believes that we are limited by this physical carriage, and that this is all that we are. It doesn't really understand that it is one with all that is. A really important part of this story is the star, that there is a star that is so bright that it has to be followed. It can't be denied. It is a massive star in the sky, too beautiful and too bright to be denied. So according, again, to the Metaphysical Bible Dictionary, this star is a representation of the revelations. It is revealed to you that there is a truth inside of you, and yet it feels very remote. You can't not see that there's a truth, but it also isn't a truth right here in your face. It's a truth in the distance that asks you to consider, some little inkling inside of you that says, you know, there are miraculous things that happen when I think a certain way. There are miraculous things, synchronicities that happen when I hold myself a certain way, when I believe certain things, when I move through life in a meditative way, when I contemplate, when I affirm. Then things begin to happen in your life and you get revelations, bright stars that tell you, hey, something amazing, some little miracle just happened. Did you see it? And those synchronicities are bright enough that we can't deny them. We have to look. We have to explore. We have to follow that lead and see what's there. The star that pointed the way for the wise men to find Jesus was in the east. And the east represents our inner conviction for divine sonship or divine being. What that tells us is we know inside of ourselves, we know that there is something about us that is holy and sacred. We say it, don't we? There's a soul inside of you. You're a body carrying around, you're a vehicle for the soul, which is actually not what Unity teaches. Unity teaches that the soul, the body, all of us, this is one being. This physical manifestation is part of the miracle of life. So if we start to put the pieces together, then we see that our inner conviction, which is what we came with, right? What the eternal knows about who we are, that inner conviction exists in the inner realms of consciousness. We know this at the heart of who we are. There is something inside of us that knows that we are more than the physical sense self. And yet, the physical sense self gets in the way. So there is a light that informs us of our divinity. We are not fully able to conceive it until we turn toward it and begin the search. Then the inner realms of our consciousness recognize it, but the self feels threatened. The sense self feels threatened. Oh my gosh, you're going to go and seek this eternal God thing. Who's going to work? What's going to happen? If you're busy being God, are you going to give up all the things that you do that take care of the body? What's going to happen here? That's really way bigger than this body. Survival is what this body is about, right? I want to point out also that this is a 2-year journey. It's specified, isn't it? It's specified that the inner realms of consciousness will take 2 years to discover the divine self. to discover that manger where Jesus, and obviously they did not stay in the manger for 2 years, right? Jesus is 2 years old. We cannot keep a 2-year-old in one place. So 2 years is something we should pay attention to. It's a worthy number to consider. Are you limited? It has to take 2 years of study to actually believe who you really are? No, I don't think so. But I think that the fact that 2 years is mentioned should be considered. What if you committed yourself to 2 years of doing everything in your power to step into your understanding of yourself as the Christ child, as the divine, as the light, as the eternal being that you are? You see, we do this in spurts, don't we? We do it at Christmas, we do a little bit of it at Easter, we kind of play in between all of that. But to really dedicate 2 years of your life to be on this journey, to really give your time to this journey. So they didn't just show up. These kings came to the house and they brought gifts. And we heard a little bit in the video about why those gifts might have been important. Upon arriving at the house, they observed the child with his mother, Mary, and they kneeled down and worshiped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold, incense, and myrrh. So let's stop for a minute and look at these words. Lectio Divina, which is a practice we've talked about, invites us to go into any scripture or reading and look at the words and assume that these words are divinely chosen, that these are not just any words. So I specifically want to go to the phrase that says, and they kneeled down and worshiped him, because I don't think of myself as a worshiper. I don't believe there's a God out there who needs me to worship, who needs me to say, yeah, man, you are fantastic. I think God knows God is God. But to kneel down to the self, to offer homage, to recognize yourself as divine, is to change your perspective on who you are. To have that sense of miraculous wonder at the God inside of you, at the holy you are, to actually care for and pay attention to and gift with your love and your attention and your gratitude. That to me is a worthy worship. To bring that sense of you as the holy you are forward. And they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold and incense and myrrh. Frankincense represents the transmutation of material consciousness into the spiritual. It represents our understanding, to say this differently. It represents our transmuting of our understanding of the material into our understanding of consciousness. Understanding that this physical form is holy and spiritual. That is a teaching unique to unity. And understanding that this physical form isn't just a vehicle we pick up, but it is a spiritual manifestation. So when we think again about worshiping the holy, how we take care of this body becomes part of the process, doesn't it? How we feed it, how we rest it, how we integrate our soul and our body together. This is a really important part of that 2-year journey, that transmutation, that shift. Gold represents the spiritual gifts and the richness of substance, which again is a really important thing to calming the Herod in us, the ego self that goes, I'm too busy, I have to take care of working and I have to fix my house and I have to do all of this stuff. The Herod part of us is afraid that our physical world is going to get lost. How many of you, I can't see your hands, but just ask yourself, How many of you have gotten lost in spiritual study at some point and not taking as much care as you could have of your physical world? It happens to me. I get very fascinated with something and I go deep in the study and everything else kind of disappears because it's a coming home to my soul. The physical part of us is worried about that for very good reason, because we have to take care of it too. So the gold represents those spiritual gifts, that richness of substance and understanding that what we need in this world is here for us. And as we allow our consciousness to bring the physical into the spiritual, then those gifts begin to show up. And when we talk about meditation as a tool, and we talk about affirmation as a tool, and we talk about the fact that those things don't work unless we combine them and collaborate with action in our physical world, this is what we're seeing. When we collaborate with the physical and the spiritual, and we bring those things together, then the richness of substance becomes ours. Myrrh represents the eternity of the spirit. This is an important awareness that is brought to us. Remember, these are the gifts that are brought from our inner consciousness. We are told, your body really matters. It's a spiritual thing. There is enough substance in the world to take care of your body, and you are an eternal being. This is just one body on your journey. These are the gifts that the internal consciousness already has. And that star that's shining is reminding you of these things. It already exists inside of you. The wise men were warned in a dream not to go back to Herod, because Herod planned to kill Jesus in order to preserve his authority. So they went home a different way. What does that tell us? It tells us we're going to change. Don't go back. Rumi says, don't go back to sleep. You are awakening to a knowing. Don't go back to this concern about the physical. Remember who you really are. The greatest story ever told is the story of our divine human nature. The wise men teach us there's a light within that knows who we really are, and that our inner consciousness is aware of it, but our sense-oriented self is threatened by it and will attempt to negate it. The inner consciousness offers ways to transmute the physical into the spiritual, an understanding of the substance of abundance that is ours, and a recognition of the divine self as eternal. We are instructed to create new ways of thinking and not go back to the old path. This is what we're here doing. This is the greatest story ever told. This is who you are, and this story lives inside of you, because you know at the core of your being who you really are. It is our mind that must be changed. It is our willingness to put attention to it. The human mind is not the same as divine consciousness. When we settle quietly in a meditative state, when we give ourselves time to be in the silence, time to get past our own inner ramblings, then we become one with the mind of the divine. And in that place of deep connection, all of this wisdom and truth exists. It's no longer a question. You will know, because it's who you really are. Now we're in winter, and winter is a time to be in the stillness. These are not the only gifts that we have to bring forth the birth of our inner self. Next week, we are going to talk about Joseph and Mary and the child, and what those pieces of this story symbolically tell us. This story is your story. This story is the story of who you are. It's the story of who I am. I know. Imagine if you were the three kings, the Jewish wise men, because they never really were named kings. The Jewish wise men who had been watching for a biblical sign. and they saw a bright star, don't you think they looked at it and went, is that it? Am I really supposed to follow that? That's a long way to go all the way to the land of Judea. What if we're wrong? That's a 2-year journey. When you say inside of yourself, what if I'm wrong? What if this is all wrong? What if we're not really divine and it's just a story? What if it's just Ahriana filling our heads with all kinds of craziness? What if it's right? What if it's true? What if you are something you haven't even begun to recognize yet? That's a much better question. We've spent, most of us, our entire life living in the possibility that we are not that, right? What happens if we commit to taking the next 2 years, 2021, 2022, what if we commit this next 2 years, not to me, because I'm not going to check your homework. You commit to you. I commit to me, to be on a journey that treats me like I'm the divine expressing. That first I'm going to fall on my knees and worship that. Yeah, like really recognize the amazing things about you. Really consider what an amazing gift you are in the world. Really be grateful and in awe of your own crazy, wild, amazing self. What if we do this together? What if? I'll just leave it right there. You can pick it up or you can leave it. I hope you pick it up. Connie?
Well, I know that I'm going to look at the star on top of my little baby Christmas tree in a new way and make the intention to, when I see that star or any representation of a star or the night sky stars, to just take a minute and breathe into that inner light here and let it be a connection, a touchstone. Thank you. Have yourself a merry little Christmas. Let your heart be light. From now on, our troubles will be out of sight. Have yourself a merry little Christmas. Make the Yuletide gay. From now on, our troubles will be miles away. Here we are as in olden days, happy golden days of yore. Faithful friends who are dear to us, gather near to us once more.